Welcome to Closing Conversations, the show for founders, leaders, and sellers who win together. I'm your host, Max Notis. Today's guest is Brano Vargic, and trust me, this one's a sleeper for anyone hiring. Brano's been a CHRO, he's built HR orgs across Europe and Asia, and now he's the co-founder of Talent Square, a platform that flips the script on how companies attract and engage talent. We dig into how most employer branding totally misses the mark, why job boards are marketplaces where your listing is a needle in a haystack, and what you can steal from e-commerce to recruit better. This one's smart, tactical, and full of no BS takes. Let's get into it. Brano, it's great to have you here. Why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself and we'll hop in.
Awesome. Well, my name is Brano Vargic. Obviously, through my accent, I'm not an American. I'm a European. I'm originally from Czechoslovakia and the Slovakia part.
Hey, in all fairness to Americans, there are a lot of Americans who speak pretty funny.
And you know what? But that's the beauty of Americans. I just had a conversation with someone about how some nations where they don't or they're not used to hearing people who are not native speakers to speak their language, they kind of become very strict about correcting you. Whereas Americans, in that sense, because there's so many people that are, that are not native speakers, are very tolerant in that regard. So anyway, I am 50 years of age, 3 children, American wife, hence my presence on the U.S. soil, but we've been traveling and because of my work, the world. Prior to moving to the United States a couple of years back and starting some endeavors, we lived for 6 years in Vietnam and I was working in financial services, half of that time in consumer finance and half of the time in a life insurance business. A lot of roles around operations and digitalizations. And prior to that, I spent almost 10 years in the banking industry in Central Europe. My history does go back to human resources. That's where my original trade was. I was in HR for about 10 years, 5 years as a HR consultant, and then 5 years as a CHRO for a bank. And then actually I left HR world with a original intention to become better HR. And to explain that notion, my customer was always internal one when I was at HR, so my managerial peers. And one of the things that I was hearing very often from them was, you don't understand our needs, our business needs, and in order for you to become better at it, you might want to consider a career change and go on the other side of the barricade, so to speak, to learn about the business. So I actually took that step and never looked back into the HR world, or at least not as a HR practitioner. So
you're a good guy to be having on this podcast. And what I love about your background is not only your whole journey to get to where you are, but right now you're a founder. You're in the HR tech space. You're helping to make the right hires. And this is a show that's meant for founders, for leaders, for sellers. And I think everything begins with your first interaction with a candidate. How are you talking to them? Who are you targeting? And bringing on the right people for your roles. And that, I think right there, if it doesn't start well, it doesn't end well. I'm a big believer in that. And what you're tackling is very much at the forefront of a candidate experience in bringing the right people, in setting the right tone to join your company. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
That's a great point, Max. Maybe there's a little bit of a story behind it. One of the breakthrough projects that I did as a CHRO was a project around employer branding. And actually, it was a project around employer value proposition. And what was interesting about that project is that it was actually run by the CEO, because and I had a great CEO in the bank where I worked as a CHRO, because he said one thing. He said, look, we can define employer value proposition. What are the things that we want to communicate to the outside world of who we are as an employer? But the key question in designing the employer value proposition is whether the profile that I'm seeking for is actually the right profile that will help me execute my business strategy. And this was, when he posed this question, I remember it vividly. When he posed this, we had a board meeting along with HR, who was kind of the executor of the project, or I was the project owner. This was a key question. So, because what I often see is a disconnect, and the disconnect between, a lot of the HR practitioners jump to the employer branding part, but the employer branding part is, quote unquote, just the communication of your employer value proposition. And so you need to, in my view, you need to get the employer value proposition right. And the employer value proposition is not about what kind of benefits do I provide, but it's about making a decision of what kind of a people profile do I as an organization need for my business strategy execution? And then followed up with the question, if I have a specific profile in mind, what sort of an employer value proposition would be attractive for that kind of profile? So it's kind of flipped, upside down, and it shouldn't start, this whole element around employer branding and employer value proposition shouldn't start from HR and from thinking about what are the things that make me stand out because I have a list of benefits that is 2 times longer than my competitor, but it should start with the business. And so this is also then linked to my moves, my career moves, and why my needing to understand the business more to be able to understand how do you do the employee value proposition. Does that answer the question?
That makes a ton of sense. And I actually love that because, like, in sales, there's a big misconception where someone books time to learn about my company. All right. They didn't actually book time to learn about my company. They booked time because they have a problem they don't know how to fix. So they're booking time with 7 other companies. And when salespeople then go and say, great, let me tell you about my company, you're missing the mark. Your better approach, and the approach that's going to make more of an impact and be just more actionable, is what are you looking for? Like, what are you trying to solve today? And if we can solve that, great, I'll tell you what we do. And if not, like, let me give you your time back. But by doing that, you're inherently making this make sense for the person as opposed to just being a brochure and saying, this is what we do. And so what you're doing is you're reverse engineering even from the talent attraction standpoint. Instead of like most job postings and saying, this is what we do, which congratulations, you're one of a billion job postings in a sea of job postings. What would this, like, we draw out our ideal candidate. What is their background? What have they done before? What did they like about their job? What did they not like about their job? What are they looking for? And write it from that angle as opposed to a company-centric angle.
Yes, exactly. I mean, exactly. And this is where, HR and myself included, I was on that boat for many, many years. And now I have just the advantage of kind of looking at that boat from outside for many years. When I was in HR, the whole HR world is continuously, talking about this, how they need, or HR needs a space at the strategic table, right? In other words, I mean, if I take it to the extreme, if you show me companies and their board compositions, if HR doesn't have a chair at the board table, that already speaks volume about how, HR has a strategic role that is being assigned to them by the board, the CEO, the shareholder. But at the same time, how does business understand this element of HR can be absolutely crucial in the transferring or transforming the hiring manager's needs to execute their strategy, to translate those hiring management needs into the language that the candidate will understand, right? I almost make a comparison between or a parallel of what I'm talking about with the IT world. One of the biggest elements in at least large enterprises in terms of delivering on their IT tech promises is organizations' ability to formulate what is needed, which is usually done by the product managers or within the agile world, product owners, and then utilizing a skill set of what is usually called business analyst. These are the people who are able to, on one hand, understand what is the product saying that the customer needs, and then convert those information into the IT language so the IT guys know what to code. And how well companies are able to execute this loop speaks about, how well their IT is run and how well what customer wants it's converted into the tech description. It's a total parallel to this element that I'm talking about, employer branding and what does business need. Business needs to be, and hiring managers, my experience, they can formulate what they need. They can be very precise about what kind of a profile they need. What happens often is that profile description is rather technical. Hiring managers, especially like salespeople, they're not able to kind of convert that into the language that the candidate would understand. That's where HR comes in, kind of like the business analyst in the product development parallel. And once that formulation is done, then like the work that my company does, which is then do the employer branding part. So how do we communicate this message out there in what verbal and visual form to make it attractive, is just the execution part.
You brought up a number of really good things, and I want to address some of them. So I think you're saying, HR doesn't have a seat at the table. And it's true. Most boards, HR does not have a board seat. They don't have that representation. And I think it's because they are looked at as a cost center. Really, it's not a profit center. Whereas this is where I also think, taking another step, I think that talent acquisition should never be under the umbrella of HR, because at the end of the day, the talent acquisition teams that get heard are the ones that are run like a business. The same with the HR departments. When they're run like a business and not like, a theoretical, flighty company culture, these are nice to haves oftentimes, you're not getting taken seriously. Whereas when you're in talent acquisition, or if you're in HR and you can really demonstrate the cost of a bad hire, if we don't get the right descriptions and we don't attract the right people, we're going to put the wrong person in place. And that's going to rub the team wrong. That's going to make people quit. They're going to lose. Their managers aren't going to be as effective. It's going to take longer to fire them up. And if they even stick, let's say worst case, they're here for 9 months, then they leave. We have to refill this role and we've gained nothing. Been wasted time. It's been wasted money. And at that point, when you can translate what you're doing to dollars and cents, it gets barked up the tree. And I've always been frustrated when I was selling into the HR space, because the HR people tend to have great ideas and they're all about all of these wonderful things in theory. But then when push comes to shove and the board is saying, you need to do this, that's it. They're doing it. They don't have a foot in the sand. They don't have that gravitas to say, no, this is right, wrong. But when it's run like a business and not like a kumbaya session, truthfully, things get done and things happen. And I'm even thinking on the flip side of that, my wife's in recruiting and talent acquisition. I think TA and sales are the same thing. I think it's ridiculous that one is the one that gets money and the other one, I don't understand why, because even as in the role, it's the same skill set. It's the same thing. And the best recruiters, like you're saying, if you're the talent manager says, this is what I want. The best recruiter recognizes there needs to be a translation between what you're saying and what gets put out there. And it needs to be sharpened. It needs to be finessed. It needs to appeal to these people. We need to get done what you need to do, but we need to put out the bait first to get the right people and then make it about that process.
There are actually two comments that I will make to what you're saying, and I 100% agree. One of the comments that I make is there is an forever ongoing debate about the HR/talent acquisition business model. When I was in the bank, I had it set up in such a way that I had HR business partners. And those HR business partners were essentially sitting with the business more than with the HR, physically sitting with them to be close to whoever they had within their scope of services. Of course, that kind of brings some complications with that sort of execution. One of the complications is that HR business partner will get pulled into the business world sometimes too much. And one of the things that I was struggling a little bit with when I had this business model was the fact, how do you establish a balanced matrix structure? Because at the same time, I wanted to make sure that while my HR business partners were sitting close to business so they can get the understanding of what the business need, at the same time, I needed to have certain influence over them to keep the HR strategy overall going. So the matrix would be something, and of course, matrix has a lot of kind of a potential obstacles for quality execution, but the matrix should be in place in my view, like you said. And the other comment that I'm going to make, I was just recently at a great talent acquisition conference in Arizona, and one of the motifs that was kind of going through the speeches at this conference was kind of interesting to watch, was the fact that the talent acquisition practitioners were loudly and vocalized about, we are not HR, we are a specific function. So, that's just kind of proves or supports your argument that talent acquisition is a quote unquote specific breed, if you will, that kind of sits in between these two worlds. And sometimes their own internal struggle is caused by the fact that they kind of don't know, right now I'm 70% on one chair, which is more on the business side, but now I'm more 70% sitting on the other chair. So there's that would be for 3 separate podcasts in terms of talking about the HR delivery business model.
I wholeheartedly agree. Now, I want to bring something else up I want you to also talk about what your company's doing, because there was a lot that when we were talking ahead of time that came up in terms of like a proper candidate experience, being able to get the right people in the door. And then how do you use candidates that you don't end up accepting and making something of it, almost recycling as opposed to just throwing it back in the garbage? Can you tell me a little bit more about your company, why you started it?
We originally started it because there was a need from our potential customers. So right now, my company is called Talent Square, and I will come back to it later, but essentially, if I were to say one-liner, we've created a Shopify-like platform, so do it yourself, for job vacancy social media advertising. How this came about. There's three of us that are behind the company as a founder slash shareholders, if you will, or people who are, involved. And we started to run job vacancy social media campaigns manually. So a few years back, we had an initial customer who was like, I need to expand on my multi-channel talent acquisition strategy. One of the channels that I'm not using yet, or I'm using in a very limited way, is social media. Obviously, participants on social media. The latest Statista research shows that the average amount of time that eligible mankind spends on social media per day is 2.5 hours. That's a huge amount of time where you are consuming content that's there. In any case, so, we hopped on. We said, okay, we can do this. We actually hired some PPC/SEO specialists. Of course, they were coming from e-commerce world, so they were much more of the marketing mindset. They knew how to do the tech setup, etc. We, all three of us, have number of years in HR combined, so we were using the HR, and we started to learn about how do you turn job vacancy, a kind of a technical, boring job description, into something that's more attractive for the social media / e-commerce world. Then we started to learn by try and fail, how do you do the targeting so those banners appear in front of those people that you are actually looking for, linked back to our debate of what kind of profile do I need for my business strategy execution, right? And so we did this manually, and when we did it manually, what that meant was we literally went into Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and were, playing with their setup. So we needed to learn ourselves on how do you deal with Pixel and how Pixel needs to be integrated into your website, what kind of interest groups you can use for targeting and how they link to the positions, etc. Besides that, dealing with Business Ad Manager, Facebook Ad Manager, and so on and so forth. And what over those 3+ years, what happened was we learned all the pain points that there are if and when someone who is trying to set it up on social media, how many pain points they have to go through. And that sparked the idea. Can we automate this? Can we take all those pain points and automate them on the back-end side of our platform, so then anyone, even a junior recruiter, can set up, design, and execute social media campaign? Of course, what helped us to kind of move forward with this notion was two things. One, this whole explosion around AI agents and what AI can do. And the second one was also what we have seen, because there's no secret, we have been taking a lot of inspiration from the e-commerce world. So what we have seen in the e-commerce happening at a rapid speed is automation of the PPC or CPC campaigns in that business sector. So I actually remember when we were starting to kind of develop this idea, I had some mystery shopping calls with companies who are doing the automation for the e-commerce world and learning from them about, what that is. So about 14 months ago, we had a discussion. We said, are we going to do this? This could enable us to scale, because the manual agency, it's very difficult and costly to scale. We were able to pull some money together and we started coding. And right now we launched a MVP of the platform in February. We were able to transfer some of our clients from the manual solution times onto the platform. And right now we are getting traction in terms of new customers. I just had a call with one potential customer. She said it's fantastic. It actually solves her problem, because she said, look, there's two elephants in the talent acquisition room at the moment. One elephant is Indeed as a behemoth that is, putting more costs on us and is kind of monopolizing the market. And the other one is LinkedIn. And LinkedIn, again, in terms of doing it manually, it's complicated, costly, and it's getting too much noise. So she was excited to see that, she would be able to use a platform that enriches her multi-channel talent acquisition strategy, and at the same time creates a new channel of how do I attract especially passive candidates, so those that do not hang out on LinkedIn, or those that are not, currently seeing, but when they're sitting on the beach during the summer and scrolling their social media, something that, again, is visually and message-wise attractive, they might click on it out of curiosity. And if you make that process frictionless for them to leave you the contact, which, by the way, e-commerce world does so well, right? They hook you in. with their lead magnets and with their initial offering. You go to the website and they will say, hey, if you leave us your email address, we'll give you 15% discount on your first purchase. That's a lead magnet. That's a hook that makes me leave them the contact. The moment that I leave them the contact, they got me where they want me. They can start sending me, information to my email about their new products, etc. This kind of a notion we are trying to apply to our platform, so the visual and the content advertisement of the job vacancy is attractive enough for the passive candidates to click on it and to leave you contact. Does that make sense?
Makes a lot of sense. First, I'm thinking, if you're on the beach, I hope you're just on the beach and not looking for a job. I hope just like be on the beach. And when you're at, I don't listen. I'm just thinking when I'm on the beach, if I'm looking at job postings, I'm not in a good place.
But Max, that's the point. See, the thing is, our platform helps companies to get the message in front of people who are not looking. It's so funny. I just recently did some research on how does that number that I mentioned, 2.5 hours, that Statista claims that or has the research that says that's how much time people on average spend on social media these days. There is research that also shows in the summer that number increases, especially with specific generations. And so, I'm hearing this message saying, summer is a downtime, nobody's recruiting because nobody's searching, just like you said. What I'm saying is actually summer is the perfect time for you to get your employer branding message out there, because the time that people spend scrolling their social media feeds on beach increases in the summer months, especially Generation Z and Generation Alpha. And so you want to get that message in front of them, especially if they're not looking, because you want to make them intrigued. The likelihood that they will click in the summer months going, hey, my mind is free of other stuff. This is an interesting message. I'm going to just click on it out of curiosity. Likelihood that they will do that is actually higher than during their work time.
That's an interesting thing. You actually opened me up to something here, because I'm a big believer of separation in church and state. Like when I'm working, I'm working. When I'm not working, I'm not working. And I try as hard as I can to hold that, and I like severance. And I do find that that's what makes me the best when I'm in front of my desk, and it makes me the best version of myself when I'm not in front of my desk. If I'm picking up my daughter and I'm thinking about work, this is bad. And if I'm trying to do work and my daughter's in the room, this is bad. Like, just as extreme examples. But at the same time, like, I remember this. I was late to the Instagram game. I just was. For whatever reason, I'm like, I don't really care about this. But then after enough time of people saying, there's really fun stuff on Instagram, like all right, I hop on. And I don't even really follow many people. I just follow like a lot of hockey accounts, a lot of like world history accounts, a lot of like funny stuff. Okay. And I'm on Instagram purely for entertainment purposes. And then at some point, and this is when I also was like probably starting commission or starting thinking about it, I see something and it's like, we built lead funnels really quickly for teams. And I'm, all right, well, I want to watch that. And okay, then another thing pops up, and the next thing I know, I got Instagram specifically for like pure enjoyment on my free time. And all of the ads are about sales and closing and all of these and building a business. And why? Because it was there when I was looking. As much as I do try to separate that church and state, it was in front of me. And it's almost like the law of advertising, where you need to see 5 to 7 brand impressions to actually, like when you see the movie poster 5-7 times, you actually sticks in your head. It's the same thing when you're posting a job. And whether it be me trying to get more leads, or somebody trying to improve their marketing, or somebody who's looking for a new job, if I see something that appeals to me, I can't help but look at it. It's why all of these things, it's why commercials work on TV. It's why all these things exist, because it is where you are, whether you like it to be or not. And the key is, if it's the right message, it's going to get your interest. And if it's not, it's going to piss you off.
Totally, Max, totally. And that's where that pinpoint of our platform and what we are trying to also kind of teach the market, teach might be a bit of a stronger word, but kind of just trying to get this notion. So, currently a lot of the recruitment / talent acquisition practice is still around job boards, right? I'm going to put my job description on the job board. Yeah, I'm going to put some visuals, potentially some video, etc. The problem is, in my view at least, is that the job description is a technical document. And so, I have actually done some kind of another level of mystery shopping, where I see a very interesting advertisement for a position or for a company, become part of our team. It's well done, visually attractive, jumps up on the Instagram. I click on it, And then the link leads me to their job board job posting. And I start read the technical document, I'm done. Actually, it backfires because I go, well, these guys, they lured me in, but they didn't follow through in terms of presenting me their, potential job in a way that would match with the branding that they use.
Or even on a more subtle thing, I click it, I go to the page, and I see all this text, and I go, fuck it. And what you just did psychologically was you made me say fuck it about your company. Now, anything else I see, it's easier to say fuck. I just don't care.
So the magic in my world, the magic is, and our current solution, what my company Talent Square creates, is helping companies and talent acquisition people to eliminate all the technical noise that otherwise they would have to learn to put it out there. What we have in a roadmap for a longer vision is also continuously include features into the platform that with AI are becoming more and more available and easy to integrate and use, that would not only help you to place the banners, on the right social media and in front of the right people, but also convert what you are communicating into something that is, like I said, visually as well as content-wise, verbalizing, attractive, and this whole disconnect between I will do attractive advertisement, but then I send the candidate to the landing page that's actually the job board post, eliminate that. I would use two beautiful examples, in the one of my two inspirations for really quality employer branding things. And actually, they're both videos, and I can talk about how we learned how much videos are much better to use for the advertisement about the job than static pictures. I don't know if you ever seen it, but I can then share it with you, the link. There's one absolutely beautiful employer branding video by Volvo. Doesn't talk about Volvo. Here and there, it shows Volvo brand, their logo, but it shows a narrative or a short movie where it represents what does it mean to work for Volvo. I highly recommend. It's got beautiful music in it. There's no words. It's got music and then shows a story. The second one is Heineken. Heineken had a great employer branding campaign. It was a video, powerful, fun. It really, truly, it was obvious that marketing was heavily involved, or they had a HR that is very marketing savvy. Fantastic example of how do you get me attracted to your message and me clicking on it, because I want to watch that video until the end because it's so cool what I see on the. And so, the video, I mentioned video from our manual times, we learned the moment that you use videos, the likelihood of people clicking on that banner with a short video, and especially if it shows in some shape and form, what does it mean to work for your company, has 2 to 3 times more clickability or more interest. And we also learned that you need to kind of time it, that the video should be anywhere between 8 to 12 seconds. If it's shorter, it's too short. If it's longer, people lose interest. So we have collected some data. We do some, consulting work, especially for our larger clients on this employer branding stuff, because we collected a lot of data, especially in the manual past, and we have some insights to help them, how to do this. But that's the secret sauce. It's how do I convert what I'm trying to communicate as my employer value proposition into attractive employer branding communication. So I make that, I make him click. I make the conversion.
I think it all boils back to what we were saying before. You have to be coming from their point of view. You can't be coming from your point of view.
Correct. And this is where, this is also where, even though I'm not a big fan of this, and there's a lot of material and a lot of work being done about how generations and X and Y and whoever differ in terms of, what they expect from the workplace, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not a big fan because I think that there's a kind of a too much of a trying to box them out. And I think that boundaries are very gray and very blurred. But I would use that parallel, and instead of using the generational element, I would go back to my, what kind of a people profile do I need for my business strategy execution in 5 years? And once I have that pinpointed, then there is companies, that do market research on what do those types of people like. I mean, I will mention Kantar, with whom I have worked before. And then, so once you have that profile, business strategy execution profile, then you can go, and whether with a third party or on your own, to start to define what is attractive for these kinds of profiles as an employer. And once you have that pinpointed down, then you can, use marketing and convert it into the messaging. And so I think that that's the thing and I think that especially that first part, the part of what kind of a people profile do I need for my business strategy execution is very often missing. And that goes back to HR not having a seat at the business table.
I think this is going also back to our earlier point. It's about thinking about it as a business. If you're thinking about it as a business, you're thinking about this, it's a sale to the right person to come aboard for the right reasons and contribute to this company, and we don't have to replace your seat. If this is just viewed as like okay, we put it out, we get, like, if it's just some nebulous process, I don't know, or if it's just flighty, nobody's taking it seriously.
I mean, employer branding you're totally right. Employer branding is essentially selling. And, this is why our inspiration from the e-commerce world, because that's what they do, right? They take a product and then they sell it. They promote it so it appears in front of those people that are more likely to buy it. It's the same thing with employer branding. Employer branding is just choosing the right communication channel and messaging. Those need to be coming from employer value proposition. And overall, they need to be wrapped up in this umbrella of, I am selling something. I am selling myself as an employer. One of the things that I kind of like to talk about is this whole job board world. Now, I'm not saying that job boards will be obsolete in the near future. No, I'm a big advocate for a multi-channel talent acquisition strategy, and advertising outbound is one of the channels. Job boards will always be there in some shape and form as a channel. However, job boards are essentially marketplaces. Amazon is a marketplace, right? Amazon is a marketplace where plenty of vendors advertise their product, sometimes services, and then you, by searching in the Amazon, little title bar what you're looking for, and based on certain elements that Amazon has in the background, certain vendors of the product that you're looking for will pop up. I don't know if you know, at the moment, I just did a research. Well, I typed in ChatGPT and I asked it, how many active vendors are there on the US Amazon? 1.9 million. 1.9 million active sellers, right? I typed in how many open positions monthly are there on Indeed? Anywhere between 180,000 to 200,000. So my question to people in talent acquisition is, if you only using job board and you're not the top 10, big names like Nvidia and Apple and Google that everybody, quote unquote, everybody wants to work for, but you are a smaller company in, semi-rural Indiana, as an example, and you put your job vacancy on Indeed or any other job board, you are one of the 1.9 million vendors on Amazon. Or if you will, you are one of 180 to 200,000 advertisers of their jobs. So my question is, what's the likelihood that you're going to be found?
I dig this. Instead of fishing with a net, you're saying fish with a spear and be where they are and put yourself in their shoes to attract them.
Or use job boards, but don't have that as the sole channel or channel that, and again, the pricing of the job boards is increasing. I know that for a fact. I was just talking with one staffing agency in England. And in England, what Indeed has done in the recent past is they used to allow staffing agencies to post for free. And now they said no more. And they put price tag on the services also for staffing agencies. There are 14,000 staffing agencies in the UK alone. And they are in an upheaval going, well, Indeed is more and more expensive. It's a money pit, yada, yada, yada. And so what I'm saying is, don't abandon job boards because you want to have multi-channel, but be aware that your recruitment budget, whatever it is, in my view, should be split into these multi-channels. And, there are certain positions that job boards will work just fine. But there are certain ones where you need to be more proactive and you need to go outbound and you need to get the message, especially if you're not the top 10 that I mentioned. You got to make sure that you're foundable. And especially for those that don't go on the job board. Job boards are predominantly marketplace for those that are actively looking, which, there's all kinds of research that says active candidates are anywhere between 30 to 35% of the overall labor market. So if you only focus on those, you're going to miss 65 to 70% potential candidates. Plus, and again, there is research on it. I hate to throw out some just comments, so I always try to see if there is some academic or whatever research. There is research that shows very clear link between passive candidates being, if you can get them interested and on board, so you get them get up from their current position and change to you, they are much more loyal to the company than they work for, and two, they are much faster getting to the standard level of performance.
Well, it also makes sense because, and I get it, be on job boards and hunt proactively. And I'm comparing this to sales where like, yeah, you're going to have inbounds, but you also need to be attacking elsewhere. And if you're also, I'm even thinking of the nature of somebody who's on a job board is someone who's looking for a job. They're either unemployed or unhappy. Whereas if you're proactively seeking, this is the person I want, you might be getting a better caliber of candidate and flipping their mind as opposed to being reactive and taking what's available.
Absolutely. And plus, the other thing is, so when you do multi-channel talent acquisition strategy, and you have job boards, you have internal referrals, you have outbound social media campaigns, et cetera, what you're doing is you are widening the top of your recruitment funnel. And 5 years ago, that might have been something that I would be a little apprehensive about, going, well, yeah, but if I open up, if I widen up the top of the funnel, I'll get more potential candidates, more people that are interested, but then do I have the capacity to screen them and go through them, et cetera, et cetera? I think that one of the reasons why the multi-channel talent acquisition strategy is still kind of narrow in many companies is because of this kind of a legacy element. What the current technology enables and the speed of development is actually, in my view, the proactive recruitment should be going on almost all the time. Of course, considering the budget that you want to spend on it and what are the restrictions there. Because even if you get 1,000 leads for a particular position and you put them through an automated AI screening solution that will narrow the next level down from 1,000, let's say, to 100. So you have 850 people who showed interest in your company, but you're going to say after first round, no, they're not fit. My question is, with the current tech and with all the stuff around AI matching candidates to jobs, why couldn't you take those 850 and run them through some other AI matching tool that will tell you, hey, by the way, in this pool that you just accumulated, and you should be thankful because your message was attractive enough for them to leave you a contact. Shouldn't you then say, run them through AI matching and find out that there are 15 candidates there are potentially for some other part that would be fit for other part of your organization, and then engage them and instead of selling and instead of communicating them at the end of the process, hey, we received your application. If you don't hear from us in 3 weeks, that means that we chose somebody else. How about we flip that upside down and say, hey, we received the application. Actually, we are sorry to let you know that you are not a fit for this position, but should you want to remain engaged with us, here is some of the things where we looked at your profile where you might be a future fit. And if you wish, and if you allow us to keep your email address, monthly we send a newsletter, not only updating our rejected candidates on what's happening in our business and our innovations, but also updating on our vacant position. Would you be interested in receiving this newsletter? Right? And again, I'm just using the element of how do I keep my customers involved from the e-commerce, because that's exactly what e-commerce does.
Yeah, I like following that model. It's as simple as advertising, having the right message, and being in front of them. And then you may have clicked on my site and not bought anything, but it doesn't mean that there's stuff you're going to see in the future that you'll also find appealing. Like, what a waste of a lead if I wait for one hit and then I say, all right, enough with that lead. Like, that's a waste of a lead right there.
Yes. And, there will be people who will say, no, I don't want your newsletter. Actually, I had a conversation yesterday with someone here in the US from the talent acquisition world. And he mentioned another interesting element when we talked about the same thing. And he said, well, when and if you try to do that, when you try to continue the engagement, you really need to be careful on what kind of engagement do you do. Because one of the things that we discussed was, well, potentially you could also try to turn those candidates that were rejected at least to your product users or your overall brand ambassadors. And Mike was this guy's name that I was talking with yesterday. He said, you might want to be careful because especially in the US right now, there's a lot of negativity around potential fraud behavior. And so they might, the perception of the rejected candidate when and if you would offer something like, hey, you can get my products at 10% discount, could be that they actually get pissed off because they will say, oh, so you are actually trying to sell me your products and this position that you advertised was just fake. So there are elements that, one need to be careful about, because I can see how that perception could be raised. But I am definitely a big advocate, and especially with the tech development that's happening, I am a big advocate for companies need to find a way what to do and how to engage those candidates that show their interest for their company. They were rejected for the particular vacancy, that pool of rejected candidates, in my mind and my book, represents a huge opportunity to solve your future recruitment problem. Because by getting a consent from them and saying, hey, I would like to keep you engaged and inform you, you are creating your own internal pool of candidates. And then you don't have to spend that much money next time you're looking for candidates in risk or in compliance, because you already have those that are involved on your newsletter receiving from the category. You analyze them before as a fit for that role. So then suddenly all you have to do is write an email to your little group of 100 previously rejected candidates saying, hey, now I have an opening. You don't have to do job boards and expensive. You don't have to do, our company outbound campaign. You've already created your internal pool. The problem is that very often, and again, I get it. I was in there. I understand it. The problem is that recruitment still very often behaves reactionary. So the hiring manager comes and says, usually with the fire, right? Because they leave it to the last minute. Oh my gosh, I have an open headcount. I need to fill that position tomorrow. And that's when recruiter starts to, go about his or her business. All right, I'm going to post a job board. Whereas if I continuously communicate my employer brand and I collect these leads and I have figured out how to keep them engaged, even though I don't have the position right now, but I value and appreciate the interest in my company, I think that's golden. And yeah, that's hard work. You got to figure out that process.
All right. So I got to say, I think you know what you're talking about. Let me ask you one question, because we're running up at time. I'm starting a team. I'm starting a sales team. What are the things that I should pay attention to and do? What are the things that I should avoid and not do? Things that you see companies typically, like pitfalls they fall into.
Well, number one question would be, what are you selling, right? Because if it's selling professional solutions, in my mind, that requires kind of a different profile than if you are selling shoes, or if you're selling, a physical product. So, we go, again, the first question would be, what sort of a profile do I need? What sort of a skill set, if you will, do I need for someone to successfully sell whatever is it that I'm selling? One of the things, I'm going to make just a little side note. One of the things that we have done when I was in the bank around this area was, and this was part of that employer branding and employer value proposition project, we actually internally looked at those people that were the most successful in their jobs, right? So we took the superstar performers in the current roles. We looked at, will their current role change with the strategy execution? And if so, how much? And then we looked at them, all right, if they are successful, why are they successful? What makes them successful? What are the profile elements that they have that make them successful? We actually talked to some of their customers to find out why they bought from them. That provided us with data needed for profile definition. What's a successful salesperson for this particular organization and for this particular set of products that we need? And that's the point. The moment that I have the profile, I can start creating what will be my messaging, whether for the job board, for the job description, or for social media campaign or whatever other, or for internal referrals. It doesn't matter, right? But it is taking the business profile that I need, knowing what that profile wants, and then communicating those elements to them so they show interest. Does that answer your question?
Yes. I like that we keep going back to this point of you got to reverse engineer it. You got to talk from, first off, you can't just post it. It's who are we talking to? What have they been through? What are they looking for? And then everything else makes sense.
I think that too often, and I don't mean to be harsh on the HR world, because like I said, I've spent too much time in it. I get it. A lot of the things that HR people these days going through, I get. It's been a decade. The tech was less, but the problems are kind of the same. So I get it. I don't mean to be critical. But at the same time, so one of the things that I am seeing is HR is very often more of the mindset with this whole element of employer branding. How do I, as an organization, become liked? When they jump on that train has certain advantages, if you will, but then it's also a slippery slope. Because then if this is your key claim, how do I become that I'm liked so I get more candidates and blah, blah, blah. Then you get to the point where you start going around, well, my benefit package is only 10 and my competition is 12. So I need to increase my benefit package because you want to be liked, right? Or my competition provides MacBook computers and I only provide IBM ThinkPads. So I need to go into, providing MacBooks. You start focusing on how do I become an organization to be liked, instead of focusing on how do I narrow down those profile that my business needs to get the strategy execution right. I think that's where the key problem is. Because, when I was working on the project in the bank, we've done some more research. For example, there was a very clear voice from the tech positions that give me the cash. I don't care about the benefit package. I want to make decision on my own, where do I spend and my wellness being. I don't want to be limited to the fitness centers that are part of the, benefit package that has contract with my organization. Sometimes then HR or whoever is in charge of this whole creating the messaging gets on that slope without knowing, because it's kind of, it's gradual, but that mental flip of, I want to make my company attractive so I get more candidates, so I fulfill the hiring manager needs for short list, long list better, can have these potential dangers. So yes, 100%, it needs to start from the business. It needs to start from a CEO question to HR and others in the organization, business managers as well. Guys, this is our business strategy in the next 5 years. These are the key aspects of that strategy delivery and execution. If this is our strategy and business execution, what kind of people do I need inside if I don't have them already to execute it? And once I have that message formulated, question number 2, what do these people want? What will make us attractive for them to come to us? And once we have those two pieces, what profile, what they want, then comes the part of that becomes the element of my employer value proposition. So I need to formulate those things in a way that I can then go to employer branding and communicate them. And that's marketing and everybody else.
All right. So I got to tell you, we are at time. Brano, this was a really sharp episode. I think our listeners are really going to get a lot out of this. I think that there's a lot to unpack here. And I think that I'm really glad we had you on the show.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I'm going to run to be with my kids if you don't mind.
Get out of here. I will talk to you soon.
Awesome, man. Thanks, Max. Bye.
And that's a wrap on this episode of Closing Conversations. Huge thanks to Brano Vargic for joining me. He brought sharp insight on what actually moves the needle in hiring, employer branding, and candidate engagement. If you got value from this episode, please give it a follow, leave a review, or send it to someone who's stuck rewriting the same job post for the 10th time. For more information on building sales teams that deliver, visit www.commissionsales.com. Until then, let's get closing. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this conversation, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. And don't forget, you can always catch us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts for more episodes of Closing Conversations.